A Fort Worth man walked out of jail free this week after spending 24 years in prison for being overcharged and therefore over-sentenced. I'm Anna Summersett, and welcome to VS News Desk. Here's some commentary on legal news making headlines for May 13, 2021. Aaron Dyson was sentenced to 50 years in prison when he was 17 years old, after he shot the man who killed his best friend. The victim survived and later was sentenced to 30 years for his crime. Dyson was wrongfully convicted based upon false and coerced testimony given by a teenager who incorrectly stated that he was a member of a gang. That claim elevated Dyson's punishment. Today, we're going to talk about wrongful convictions and the tremendous power that prosecutors have in deciding whether or not to bring criminal charges against someone, and what exactly those charges or enhancements to punishment should be. Prosecutors also have a constitutional obligation to ensure defendants receive all of the evidence that might assist in their defense. This goes far past the conviction date, as it did in this case. Let's first hear from Dyson's mother.
Oh, they lose their life. I mean, they don't have any sense of being able to grow up. I mean, they don't have any mentors. They don't have any parents, any kind of instructions on. I'm so worried about when he gets out, how he's going to know all this stuff. I can't imagine in my mind what it's like to be in one building for 23 years.
As a criminal practitioner, I think one of the common misconceptions that people have is that a judge in a case ultimately decides what an individual's charge is going to be, whether a case is going to be dismissed, what a sentence will be if the individual is convicted. That's simply not true. The vast majority of cases are decided by a prosecutor alone. Only about 3% of all cases end up in a jury trial situation, where a jury or a judge, depending upon a defendant's selection, would issue punishment or render a punishment after a guilty verdict. The rest of the time, it is a prosecutor who makes the decision what charge they're going to proceed on, what punishment enhancements they're going to pursue, what term of years or probation or alternative resolutions they're going to allow in a case. That's a huge responsibility. Certainly, there are pressures that prosecutors deal with when evaluating cases. They're looking at the desire of the victim in a case. They're looking at any particular violence involved, whether a defendant can be rehabilitated. I think what we've seen over the past few decades after the 1990s, when so many people went to prison under a tough-on-crime regime, is that prison really should be exclusively for those who need to be separated from society for safety's sake, whether the safety of the alleged victim in a case or the safety of the community at large. It is very difficult to send an individual to prison and get that individual back. They will come back a different person. As you heard from Mr. Dyson's mother, she can't imagine what it's like to spend 23 years in the same building and looking at the same walls and not having access to family. She estimates that they have spent 1 month together cumulatively over the last 23 years because the visitations are so limited. The other consideration for cases like this is that prosecutors have an ongoing obligation to release newfound evidence or previously undiscovered evidence that would assist the defendant. In this case, it was uncovered that the teenager who gave testimony in Dyson's case was coerced, that he wasn't necessarily telling the truth, and that he felt forced to provide the testimony that Dyson was involved in a gang. That testimony is what enhanced Dyson's penalty. He ultimately was sentenced to more years for shooting the individual out of anger who killed his best friend than the individual who killed his best friend was. Thankfully, the Tarrant County District Attorney's Office Integrity Conviction Unit did just that. They reviewed the case, they uncovered the false testimony, they recommended the proper remedy, and Mr. Dyson is set to be freed. But after how many years? He has served over 23 years in custody. We hate to see the cleanup so far after, but are thankful, of course, that it exists. Wouldn't it be better to have the proper prosecutor discretion up front to ensure that witnesses aren't tampered with, they're not coerced, they're not forced, and that prosecutors aren't making the most egregious decisions on how to pursue a case? Just because you can max somebody out doesn't mean you should. Those are just a few questions we have. If you have any questions, please comment below. We're happy to answer in any way that we can. That's it for VS News Desk, the place you turn to for the latest legal news. If you have any other questions, you can go to our website, versestexas.com, where there are plenty of articles and blogs that should be helpful to you. I'm Anna Summersett, and thanks so much for joining us.